Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting. Whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the Facebook page. It was just 9 years ago this month that I first outlined on this show the biblical prophecies found in the Hebrew and New Testaments of the possible end times to come. After that depressing topic, on a follow-up program, I featured Janice Goff's telling of a Hopi prophecy that included a way out, an option, if we were smart enough to take it, for peace to be our companion for the foreseeable future. Today, we await Israel's revenge attack on Iran for the last missile exchange. Iran, ancient Persia, is included in the prophecy of those who attack Israel, along with the ancient named countries of Sudan, Libya, and Turkey. Iran's ally Russia is featured dramatically, which back then was described as attacking Israel on horseback, but today possesses the world's greatest arsenal of nuclear weapons. Today, we're holding Russia back in its invasion of Ukraine. As long as we do, we delay and perhaps defeat the possibility of World War III. Now, a crisis decision on the defense of Ukraine and what that means for Israel is at our doorstep. So I thought I might again review the alternatives that still might be available to us. The second half of this show includes Janice Goff's visit years ago to the late Hopi Grandfather Martin, and their discussion of a Hopi prophecy as an alternative to World War III. By the way, in this Chinese Year of the Dragon, I'm not alone in noting the danger of the day. Biblical prophecy professional Rabbi Jonathan Cahn recently published a book on biblical end times titled The Dragon's Prophecy, Israel, the Dark Resurrection, and the End of Days. And it pretty much mirrors my thinking of 9 years ago. Iran, now allied even more closely with Russia, is the sworn enemy of Israel. The main difference, I think, between Rabbi Khan and myself is he is locked into Bible prophecy, while I believe God remains open to alternatives. I do still hope for an Archangel Michael-led peaceful solution to all-out war in the Middle East. At the very least, we're obliged to try. But regardless of who proves right, we are certainly 9 years closer to our fate than the first time I aired these thoughts. So let's begin with Ezekiel 38's prophecy concerning Russia and Israel.
So this begins with verse 1. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Gog, Russia, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech, which some people think is a derivation of the city of Moscow, and Tubal. And then it says, Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them. Now that, of course, is Iran, and there is an alliance right now between Russia and Iran, which is more than coincidence, I think. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets. Also Gomer with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the far north with all its troops, the many nations with you. Get ready. Be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel. And this, of course, sounds like the restoration of Israel when the Jews came from all over the world to repopulate it. Whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They had been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. You and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind. This is the evil thought that enters the leader's mind. And you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, and to seize much plunder? Therefore, Son of Man, prophesy and say to Gog, to Russia, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In that day, when my people Israel are living in safety, will you not take notice of it? You will come from your place in the far north, you will, and many nations with you, and these, of course, are all of the various small tribes, the small countries that existed then, which have been combined into the larger nation of Russia. All of them riding on horses, a great horde, a mighty army. And, of course, all they could envision when they were having their dreams of war were horseback. You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, Gog, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. This is what the sovereign Lord says. It goes on. We're now to verse 17. You are the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel. At that time they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. This is what will happen in that day when Gog attacks the land of Israel. My hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord. In my zeal and my fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. And when you hear the word earthquake in this prophecy and others, think of the repercussions of an all-out nuclear holocaust. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people of the face of the earth will tremble in my presence. The mountains will be overturned, the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him and on his troops and on the many nations with him. That's Ezekiel 38, 1 through 22. And notice the recurring earth-shaking and fire that comes out of these descriptions, because that's, if you were envisioning nuclear war, that's what you would be seeing. Here's one from the prophet Zechariah. Bear in mind that these are all Old Testament readings, where this is some of this hundreds of years before Jesus. This is the plague which the Lord will strike all the nations that fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Doesn't that sound like radiation? Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. On that day, people will be stricken by the Lord with great panic. They will seize each other by the hand and attack one another. Which is an interesting image. Seize each other by the hand and attack one another. Judah too will fight at Jerusalem. The wealth of all the surrounding nations will be collected. Great quantities of gold and silver and clothing. A similar plague will strike the horses and mules, camels and donkeys, and all the animals in those camps. Of course, radiation kills the animals just as readily as it does the people. So those are some of the Old Testament references to a Russian invasion of the Middle East, culminating in what sounds like a worldwide nuclear conflagration. Now, let's take a look at some of the New Testament readings on the matter. And this is, I've abridged some of this just for a matter of time, and also because Jesus talks a lot about false prophets that may or may not pertain. But in any way, this is Matthew 24. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came to him to call his attention to its buildings. this temple at that point was fairly new. This is Herod's temple, and it was quite grand. I've seen models of it, and they have some reproduction models in Jerusalem itself that you can visit. Do you see all these things, he asked? And this is in response to their saying, look at this, isn't this great? Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Reminds you in some ways of the Twin Towers, actually. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will all this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Jesus answered, and here we skip to verse 10. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people because of the increase of wickedness. The love of most will grow cold. And I think we can see some of that happening in society right now. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. And then he goes on in verse 15. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. And this, by the way, would be on the site of the temple that's been destroyed, but it is still the site. And this is plays a key role, of course, in all of the prophecies about Israel. It's the Temple of the Mount, the location where the first temple of Solomon was built. Let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. In other words, this is going to come really fast, and you've got to get out of town. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the south, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. And in 28, wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. And then Jesus quotes from Isaiah, immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Now, after a nuclear war, no doubt, there'd be so much dirt and dust in the air, probably radioactive, that none of the light from the sun or the moon would be clearly visible at that point. Stars falling from the sky could very well be missiles raining down, other weaponry, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. I think just the vibrations of the earth from a bombing like that would be enough to make everything seem to be unstable. And then Jesus gives us a clue as to when this might happen. He makes reference to Israel, which of course was Israel in those days. Israel symbolized by the fig tree. And this reference interpreters take to mean the reestablishment of Israel and the generation dating from 1948. This is verse 32. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree, Jesus says. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, in other words, when Israel is once again flourishing, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. That is the end. Truly, I tell you, this generation of the rebirth of Israel will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. And then, of course, we have to look at the book of Revelation. This is John of Patmos. His visions. The story goes that he lived in a cave when he was writing this. You can imagine him in a dark place, either dreaming or envisioning a final destruction. The sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the four horns of the golden altar that is before God. It said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, "Release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates, and the four angels who had been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind." A third of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was twice 10,000 times 10,000. I heard their number. And by the way, that's 200 million is the number of the size of the Chinese army today. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Now, as you hear this, envision heavy weaponry and try to see it in the eyes of a first century person living in a cave. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the three plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, where the guns would be mounted. For their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury. The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the works of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, and bronze, stone and wood, idols that cannot see or hear or walk, nor did they repent of their murders, their magic arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts. That's Revelation 9, 13 through 21. And then from Revelation 16, then they gathered the kings together in the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and out of the temple came a loud voice from the throne saying, "It is done." Then there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since mankind has been on earth. So tremendous was the quake, the great city split into three parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. God remembered Babylon the Great and gave her the cup filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. Every island fled away, and the mountains could not be found. From the sky, huge hailstones, each weighing about 100 pounds, sounds like weaponry to me, fell on people, and they cursed God on account of the plague of hail, because the plague was so terrible. Who knows what seismic shocks would result from an all-out nuclear war? I mentioned at the beginning of the show that I was born around the time of the first open-air nuclear test. But consider this. At the time, my grandparents were still having blocks of ice delivered by horse and wagon to their kitchen door for their ice box. And this was not in some third world country. This was in New Jersey. And in less than 50 years, we had moved from a total horse and buggy society to one that could split the atom. So would it surprise you to learn that such a technological revolution may have happened at least once before in India? The following description of a nuclear war may go back some 24,000 years. It lived in Indian oral tradition until it was recorded in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These two great ancient epics of India, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, are centered on conflicts and refer to military formations, theories of warfare, and esoteric weaponry. And the Mahabharata is an amazing work. It's been compared to the importance of that of the Bible, the works of Shakespeare, the works of Homer, Greek drama, the Quran. Oh, and a note, by the way, the similarity of the name of the supreme god at the time, Krishna, with the name of Christ. Lord Krishna in the Mahabharata was known as the Almighty. The word Krish, which means place, and Na means high or highest in the celestial world. Lord Krishna was the ultimate ruler and the highest order among the gods known back then. So here is a text, ancient Indian text, dating back 24,000 years. It's about a nuclear war. Gurkha, flying a swift and powerful, fast aircraft, hurled a single rocket charged with the power of the universe. Sounds like a nuclear device, doesn't it? An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose with all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and the Andakas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Hair and nails fell out. Again, that sounds like radiation. Pottery broke without apparent cause. That also sounds like radiation. And the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. And there are further accounts of the animals rushing into the rivers trying to wash off this deadly radiation and the burns. When I first studied these texts in the Eastern Studies program at Columbia University in the 1960s, it reminded me of the descriptions of radiation poisoning from John Hershey's little book, Hiroshima, which is a powerful description of what happened when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Here's another quote. It was a weapon so powerful that it could destroy the earth in an instant. A great soaring sound and smoke in flames, and on it sits death. That's from the Ramayana. Also, dense arrows of flame like a great shower issued forth upon creation, encompassing the enemy. A thick gloom swiftly settled upon the Pandava hosts. All points of the compass were lost in darkness. Fierce wind began to blow upward, showering dust and gravel. Birds croaked madly. The very elements seemed disturbed. The earth shook, scorched by the terrible, violent heat of this weapon. Elephants burst into flame and ran to and fro in a frenzy. Over a vast area, other animals crumbled to the ground and died. From all points of the compass, the arrows of flame rained continuously and fiercely. That's from the Mahabharata. It's claimed there are sites of ancient Indian cities where the radiation counts are much higher than normal background radiation could account for. So isn't it possible that India had a moment of high technology back in what we now call prehistoric times, a time we have nearly forgotten? And that technology led to the downfall of an advanced civilization. And isn't it possible that we could do the same things to ourselves? Plato's legend of Atlantis certainly offers the same picture of an early advanced civilization that fell to ruin through natural disaster or perhaps by their own hand. And when you think of how reliant we are on the fragile structures of the Internet, its loss, along with the power grid, high-tech farming, water supplies, and the power supplies that we rely on so tremendously, the failure of those in a nuclear blast would certainly bring our civilization as we know it to an end in a hurry. All the records, all the knowledge that we've accumulated, if it's in the cloud, it'll be gone. The question on the table is this: what can each of us as individuals do to change the course of human destiny? There's a story in the Jewish tradition that the prayers of 36 holy men are what keep the world from destruction. The Talmud tells us that at all times there are 36 special people in the world, and that were it not for them, all of them, if even one of them was missing, the world would come to an end. The two Hebrew letters for 36 are the Lamed, which is 30, and the Vav, which is 6. Therefore, these 36 are referred to as the Lamed Vav Tzadikim. This widely held belief is based on a Talmudic statement to the effect that in every generation 36 righteous greet the Shekinah, the divine presence. Mystical Hasidic Judaism, as well as the other segments of Judaism, believe that these 36 righteous people exist to justify the purpose of humankind in the eyes of God. Jewish tradition holds that their identities are unknown to each other, and that if one of them comes to a realization of their true purpose, they would never admit it. This past week I did a service as hospital chaplain, blessing the pet therapy dogs and their volunteer owners for the good work they do in visiting the patients and their families as they go room to room through the hospital. These are such welcome visits to nearly every patient they see. The big dogs stand by a patient's bed for petting, while the little dogs will jump right into the bed if invited, lying still to be petted and hugged. You can actually watch the monitors and see the patient's heart rate and breathing become more normal as the pet therapy dog takes their stress away. It's said that whoever saves only one life saves the whole world, and I used to tell myself that when, as an ambulance EMT years ago, I sometimes had to do CPR for up to an hour before we got our patient to the hospital. But standing in front of our chapel service for the dogs last week, I had to think even these dogs and their work are saving the world. If the prayers of 36 holy people are keeping the world from destruction, think what thousands of pet therapy dogs, volunteer ambulance workers, hospital volunteers, prison volunteers, church and shelter volunteers, volunteers of every stripe and calling for that matter, are added to the mix. From the dedicated bottom up, not from the corrupt top down, the world is being saved day by day. But even people without the time, resources, or inclination can contribute to a world-saving effort that can overturn grim prophecy. Yes, the prophecy of destruction is in the Bible, but so is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where we see God is willing to negotiate, saving those towns if only a few good people can be found there. The Creator called the creation good, and another Eden is the heaven most of us envision, and I believe you and I and God can still make that possible. How do we do it? The most immediate and powerful thing we can do is pray. Prayer takes many forms, from chant to deep meditation to just thanking God for the beauty of the earth. But it's critical that we join those 36 holy people in their assignment to interface with the divine presence. Now, here are some of the prayers I used at our blessing of the pet therapy dogs. We started with a Jewish prayer that goes, "Blessed is the one who spoke and the world came into being. Blessed is the one who maintains creation. Blessed is the one who has compassion on the earth. Blessed is the one who has compassion on the creatures." And then I followed that with a Catholic prayer. "Blessed are you, holy God, maker of all living creatures. On the 5th and 6th days of creation, you called forth fish in the sea, birds in the air, and animals on the land. You inspired us to call all animals brothers and sisters. We ask you to bless these brothers and sisters by the power of your love. Enable them to live fully in praise of your name. May we always praise you for all your beauty in creation. Blessed are you, Lord our God, in all your creatures. Amen." And finally, I followed with a prayer from the Sioux people. "Grandfather, Great Spirit, all over the world the faces of living things are alike. With tenderness they have come out of the ground. Look upon your children that they may face the winds and walk the good road to the day of quiet. Grandfather, Great Spirit, fill us with the light. Give us the strength to understand and the eyes to see. Teach us to walk the soft earth as relatives to all that live." If you're wondering how the mechanics of prayer actually work, I refer you to my 2 interviews a few weeks back with Thomas Abraham. He makes the case for how individuals tap into a collective consciousness, and through what he terms cosmoethics, each of us can make a difference. And a Greek Orthodox mystic from Cyprus, Doscelos, termed our thought and prayer projections elementals, which can contribute to the love or anger in the world at large. Our projections are our interface with the divine and with each other, and what we think or pray for has the power to become reality. Well, our very patient guest today is Janice Goff, and she's been on NDE Radio before. She was a friend to Grandfather Martin, the keeper of the Hopi prophecy when he was alive, and Grandfather Martin and Janice talked a little about the possibility of escaping prophecy. And now here to tell us about her visit with Grandfather Martin is Janice Goff. Janice, welcome back to NDE Radio.
Hey, good morning, Lee.
It's good to hear your voice. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good. Everybody's
good
when they get on your show, I think.
Well, I wonder if you could tell us what you told me about your trip to visit Grandfather Martin and what you talked about there.
Well, a friend, this was, 8 or 9 years ago, a friend invited me to go to Hopi with him, and I said, sure. I had never been up there and was really looking forward to it. Well, in the days after his invite, internally I began to get really excited. It was that anticipation that something interesting was going to happen. So I was really kind of geared up and looking forward to this. So we made the 4-hour drive up there, and when we got up to the second mesa to his house, which is looks like a ruin, just one of the old stucco brick buildings, we drove up, and there was this huge, massive, huge eagle on the door, hanging on the door frame over the door. And we sat in the car looking at this with our mouths open. Finally, he said, well, we should go in. So we got in and knocked on the door. The eagle was still on the door frame, and we're looking under the belly up through, up the body of the eagle.
Wow.
And he's just sitting there looking at us. Okay, so she opens the door, and this is Grandfather Martin's wife, and she said, hello, come in. We've been expecting you. The eagle told us that you were coming. So there is no communication up there, no telephone. Grandfather Martin has you have no way of contacting him to get an invite or, to request an invite. You just go. And then if they're home, maybe they'll entertain your presence, So we went in. Grandfather was already prepared with his translator, and he began to spread out scrolls that he had taken out from underneath his couch onto the table. And I'm looking at these scrolls, and of course I wasn't real familiar with the Hopi, their culture and all the different things. Very complex culture. But Grandfather Martin began to talk and tell me about these scrolls and what I was seeing on them. And it appeared to be a rubbing from the prophecy rock. And he was describing to me how what each symbol was. So at the left we have Massa, who is the Hopi god of death, fire, and the earthly plane. And his arrow is pointing to the previous world, the third world. And his left hand holds the path to the current fourth world. We're now in the Hopi tradition of the fourth world. There is a square that begins then on this prophecy rock, and the square represents the village, the pueblo, the plaza, the Hopi territory. And then there's two parallel lines, and this is the important part on the prophecy rock. The two parallel lines refer to the two paths that humankind can take at the end of the current fourth world that we're in right now. So we can take the upper line, that's the path of the two hearts, and this line ends in a zigzag up in the air, and then the lower line is the path of one heart. And resting on this line from left to right are three circles, which represent three worlds shaking, or the three world wars. To the right of the last circle is a cornstalk and a Hopi man tending corn. And that is the path of the one heart who follows the law of the land and the old ways and the teachings that you can hold true to, the foundation of the goodness of man. So between these two parallel horizontal lines, there is a vertical line that comes from one to the other. This is the last chance of the two hearts that they have to descend to the true path and get back on the right way. So we have the two paths, the two hearts. The two hearts are the ones that are going to continue the doomsday prophecy. And then the one heart path is the path that people can choose to adhere to the old ways, to follow the traditional teachings that keep people safe, good, and evolving in a peaceful way. Now, in your last show, Lee, you discussed how many prophecies there are out there, hundreds there are hundreds of prophecies out there all over the world. One of the things that really interested me while I was sitting there with Grandfather Martin is that intuitively I went into a vision state while he was talking, and I saw on top of, at the beginning of the Hopi Prophecy Rock petroglyph, the square that represents the village or the Hopi territory. The top of the house, there is an exit. And I pointed to that to him, and I said, there's a door at the beginning of this prophecy where we can actually get out of prophecy and not take either of those two paths, but create a whole new world. And he lit up and said, oh my gosh, the elders talked about a way to get out of prophecy, but nobody knew where it was, where the door was. So we talked about that for a little while. At the end of the line that represents the two hearts, there is a zigzag that goes up into the sky, and it ends nowhere. It goes nowhere. And I said, that stairwell is the last chance for the two hearts, those who are going to do the belief system of the doomsday, the World War III, and all of that type of life. There's a door there for them to escape so that they, too, can create a whole new world. And we talked about that for a little while. This was real interesting to me. After we left there, of course, my mind is just reeling and perking. It dawned on me that all of these hundreds of prophecies that you talked about on your last show, there is a doorway out of prophecy. We have continually been given options and exits to change our mind and change our life. So then what I got to looking at was, okay, so in this prophecy rock, we're shown how we're going into the fifth world. And before every age, all right, the fourth world is supposed to be the age of Aquarius. Before every age, root children are born with traits of the new age already intact. So we began to see all of what's called the indigo children coming into our world. They have innate psychic and telepathic abilities, extraordinary spiritual abilities. All of your incredible near-death experiences from these children that we've all heard about, perfected musical and artistic talent. All of these children are born with traits of the new age already intact. So this is the indigo prophecy. It states that humanity's safety lies in evolving spirituality. That's the door in the indigo prophecy. So all of our prophecies have a door out of the prophecy. We can, our belief systems decide what kind of life we're going to live. So we have preppers who believe and prepare for doomsday. We have the rapturists who believe they're going to be raptured and taken away before Armageddon and that great time of tribulation. Every belief system decides what kind of life we're going to live and essentially how we're going to prepare for what we believe in. That belief system, I think, is described in the indigo prophecy, is that safety lies in evolving. And I think that's the door. I'm not sure what that new world looks like beyond prophecy, and I'm not sure any of us know, but there's a door out of all of these prophecies. That was totally fascinating to me.
Wow, it must have been quite a meeting that you had with Grandfather Martin.
It was, and I had been up there quite a few times after that. Each visit was just as full and just as expanding to my mind. They're the timekeepers of the world. So as our elderly in all of our cultures who are holding close and dear and totally hold the traditions of the old people as they're passing away, what we hope is that there were enough young people that were grasping their teachings and the energy that they moved, and, will continue those traditions for us so that not only the history is not lost, but that the cultures continue to have that line of foundational learning and teaching for all of us, for everyone. I still believe that even though we're looking at such a hard next couple of years, that humanity, every one of us, regardless of what we think about it, we are going to evolve. Now, what we evolve to is anybody's guess,
Right. Exactly. Well, there is this theory. There is this theory that wisdom and knowledge is not lost, that exists outside of our own minds and in the collective unconscious spot that we could call the Akashic record. And perhaps it's going to require the Indigo children to tap into that, because if the oral traditions of the Hopi, for instance, or even of other religions and other peoples aren't passed down orally the way they have been from generation to generation in the past, maybe the more psychic Indigo children will be able to tap into this spiritual realm of knowledge and pick up on what the truth is.
And be texting it to each other. So,
yes, right.
Well, it's what we think we manifest. If what we think actually turns into actual action and actual events, then I believe that what we think is actually energy, and you can't get rid of it. It doesn't go away. The energy does not just zap, it's gone. It continues to move and change. So everything that we think and believe turns into a manifestation. Lee, if it's as simple as that, and the Indigo prophecy has said that humanity's safety lies in evolving spirituality, but changing the world is as simple as changing our mind. Humans on Earth are the only beings that can do this. All the other beings on Earth follow the natural order of the law of their species. But humans were created with a will and can change their mind. It's that easy to change our world. It's simply to change our mind and to do something different.
That's what's so wrong with the way society is structured right now, because if everyone watches bad news on television every night and all they do is radiate fear and anger, then that change that we need won't come about.
Yeah, and it takes, for that kind of energy to go out on our airwaves, the balance for that means there needs to be hundreds of thousands of us balancing with the good energy to divert that action that's being created from all that bad. And we can call it good and bad. We might call it negative and positive because it just doesn't go away. So is there good and bad energy? No, there's not. There's just energy, and it depends on how it's used. So negative and positive might be a better description of energy and what it can actually do.
Well,
I find myself impatient, though. I want it to happen now. I want peace now.
That's because we're getting older, Janice, and we want to see it in our lifetimes, for sure.
This is true. This is true.
I think, one of the things I started off by talking about prayer and how prayer is so important. And if we all joined those 36 holy people the Jews talk about and prayed at least once a day, or maybe more, that we would be putting out this positive energy, this love energy, instead of this anger and this fear energy that so many people are manifesting right now. The other things too, though, it strikes me, are getting out of staring down at your smartphone all day long and making eye contact with people and having conversations with people, and not just playing games on the tablet, but actually communicating with one another would also generate positive energy.
I would think so, Lee. The technology is the way of the world, and they're creating relationships in a way that you and I didn't have the liberty to try it out. So we're not always real positive about that type of relationship building. We want relationships face to face. You shake someone's hand, you look in their eyes. Well, I'm going to get in the elevator and send them a text instead, And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really for the type of relationship building that, is happening today, but evidently it's serving a purpose for the new age. I still believe, though, even though as we watch the doomsday prophecy unfold, and that's the only thing we're going to hear on the news. We're not going to hear all these hundreds of thousands of stories like on your radio show and all the near-death experiences and the experiences that you hear with the families at the hospital and all that. We're not going to hear all those wonderful stories of miracles on our TV. So, but I still believe as doomsday prophecy appears to be unfolding, that there's many signs that also show us that our planet is moving up in consciousness and becoming more aware. So as those of us that are praying and we're sending out good thoughts to each other and we're moving energy in this way every day, if we keep those, or even if we just look every day to try to find those stories that make us feel that goodness and that appreciation and gratitude for each other and life, I believe we're moving energy in a balancing way. And for myself, I can't live my life any other way. I want everybody I talk to and their families to be blessed. I want them to enjoy the abundance that's available to all of us simply by changing your mind and doing something different. I do believe that we can avoid, massive encounters with our doomsday prophecy. I don't know that fate and destiny can be diverted, Lee, but as in this prophecy rock, there is a door out of prophecy. So then we create a new world. I do believe it's a possibility.
We see all these signs of environmental degradation and changing weather patterns and the death of the bees and the butterflies, the monarch butterflies, and it is very worrisome. But it seems like we could turn this around if we really devote ourselves to sending some love energy back into the earth.
I think the earth is going to continue to evolve and do what it's always done. And I've thought back about our caveman life and what the survivors must have thought when, after the doomsday destruction during that time happened, and there were no more giant animals to feed on for their food. And I am like, but they rebuilt their world, they rebuilt their life, but this massive food source was no longer available. They still evolved. Because we're here, So we do adapt to the changes. We will continue to adapt to the changes. And my prayer is that many more people will find that source of spirit within themselves and start sharing more of that,
Yes.
and just we look for those people and we connect to those people. That's what gets me through the day.
Yeah. Janice, we're out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your story of your encounters with Grandfather Martin.
You're so welcome.
Do we still have time enough to save Israel and the world from destruction? I believe just barely, if we proceed with love, beginning today. Well, thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived, ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying, once again, thanks for listening.